Should Winter Olympic events be locked away behind a paywall, and with the rising price of sports rights and everything else, how far is too far for consumers and the industry? For more, we're joined from Sydney by Darren Woolley from Trinity P3. Great to see you. Have you been watching any of the Olympics?
I haven't had a chance, Ahron, and it's good to be here. I've been busy watching the fun and games in Canberra with the Senate estimates this week. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes. There's been a lot happening there as well. And interestingly, last week, the Foxtel roadshow headed to Canberra as well, with all of the splendour of the Fox Sports hosts and everyone getting involved there as well. The key message that paywalls can work, investment, etc. But there are questions about the Winter Olympics and about Stan and how much is stuck behind a paywall, and that overarching question of what should be on the anti-siphoning list and what should, I guess, be something that media companies can make money from.
Look, and I think Patrick Delaney from Foxtel in their roadshow summed it up beautifully, which is the anti-siphoning list was largely set up for a free-to-air broadcast world. And now the world is much more digital, and people are watching streaming, they're watching it on their phones. The way we consume sport has changed a lot, and yet the anti-siphoning is largely about protecting free-to-air broadcast companies and their advertisers than it is necessarily about making it free. We've got to remember that anti-siphoning says to make culturally important sport available to all people. But, in many ways, it is available on the internet these days.
And the word free means a lot, right? Like this idea that if you watch free-to-air television, it's free. Well, your eyeballs have to keep watching a whole lot of ads. And there are some people who say, look, I would just rather spend a bit of money and not have to watch any ads. They're still getting access to it. I mean, the word access compared to free access is an interesting one.
Yeah, and look, that's where the government's in a bit of a bind here, because they're also under a huge amount of pressure to regulate the type of advertising that appears on there. The anti-gambling movement is saying, well, we don't want gambling ads in sport because of the impact that has on communities and influencing young people. So, to say you have to only generate your income from advertising to make it free to people, and then on the other side say we're going to choke that source of revenue, is a bit of a conundrum for everyone involved. And I know the government's under a lot of criticism because every time they say they're going to do something about gambling advertising, they then back off or water it down. And I think this is part of the problem. How do we provide it supposedly, as you say, in quotes, free, and at the same time say to them that they can't make money through subscriptions?
And it's a fascinating point, because every CEO of any sporting body in Australia, probably the world now, is judged by how much money they can squeeze out of those media organisations to push that bidding up. And the hope had been to get away from free-to-air networks, that Paramount and Amazon Prime and Netflix and Apple TV would jump into the Australian market to broadcast and push up the prices of everything. Paramount was meant to with the AFL. Didn't happen. But at the same time, as you say, the anti-siphoning is meant to keep alive the free-to-air networks. How's that going, given we're looking at the prices and the valuations of Channel 7 and Channel 10 and the losses and the fact that costs and operating costs versus revenue and profit, it's not looking great out there. So how can sports codes keep squeezing the lemon without killing it?
And look, that's the point, is sport has become a big business. And so, and government's trying to regulate it. We've got to start stepping back from just talking about broadcast television and look at sport in all its forms. Again, I'll say, Foxtel, which was bought by the UK company, and I always get it wrong, DAZN, I think it is, or
DAZN. It reads DAZN, but it's DAZN.
Yeah. They're going to invest billions of dollars, not just buying rights, but also creating a user experience where you can customize your sports experience using AI. And this is the type of innovation that the market needs, rather than just linear TV running the sport. And they've done a lot of technology innovation with the way they cover sport. But still, it's a linear, multi-channel format, whereas the possibility of the digital world is that you can actually make a better viewer experience where they can be much more interactive with it. it takes a huge investment.
Yeah, and obviously the advertising market is changing significantly for free-to-air advertising as well. We're seeing that in the numbers, 25% declines across the board in some cases, double-digit declines in 1 month in October last year, the networks were reporting. Disney, which owns ABC, one of the big three in America, not even now putting out the numbers that ABC is making as part of its divisions-wide reporting, because that's where things are at. All right, let's move on because we could talk about this forever. But a significant leadership change at The Guardian in Australia. Lenore Taylor, the longest-serving editor of The Guardian Australia, announcing her resignation after nearly a decade, marking the end of an era and paving the way for new editorial leadership. Interested in your thoughts here. There's obviously been a few stories about what's been happening in the Canberra bureau of The Guardian, but when The Guardian arrived in Australia, it was this kind of crucial time where news organisations started to pick sides when it comes to politics and viewpoints. What do you think of that? What has been the impact of Lenore Taylor?
Well, look, I think, first of all, Lenore was one of the first people on the ground for The Guardian and then rose to the role of editor and has been probably the current longest serving editor in the media market, news media market. So, it is a significant change. But you're right, when The Guardian entered, they were deliberately positioned, and always have been, as being the voice of the left of politics. What that did was it completely reshaped the landscape, because News Corporation, or News Limited as it was back then, was very good at switching each election and backing whoever they thought was going to be the winner, or best, in their words, best for the country. But, now what we saw was that they pushed to the right. It's left what was Fairfax 9 trying to work out some middle ground, and we see with the AFR they're inclined to be slightly right for business, and then more socially progressive for the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age. So suddenly our news became incredibly politicised, and I think that this is not necessarily a good thing. There is a role for journalism to actually report, rather than always being a commentator with pushing a particular perspective. And part of that has led to, this idea of fake news and, what can we really trust? Because it's being pushed from a political agenda rather than being a news story.
It's funny though, if you ask people in a survey what's important to you about news, they always say not picking a side, independence, not going Liberal or Labor or left or right. Yet the viewership tells us that that's exactly what people want, what people do. And having worked for a news organisation on Foxtel where it was all about not having an opinion, but watching when the ABC launched a news channel and all of a sudden, late night TV shows begin where they're choosing sides and things. When one side does something, the other responds, and that has very much been what we've seen in the media market, not just in Australia. We've seen it with GB News in the UK. We've seen it obviously with Fox News in the United States, the New York Times taking a side, Wall Street Journal, New York Post on the other side as well. What's happening to trust amongst all of this? Because if people feel like the news has an opinion, what happens to trust here and the long-term viewpoint and I guess health of the industry as a result?
I like the fact that you're raising trust with a marketing person. But look, the thing is that in actual fact, consumers trust people that are inclined to tell them what they want to hear. Right?
Yeah, but isn't that the point you've just made though? Hang on, you just said marketing. This is all just about marketing, right? Like these are news organisations making products that are targeted at people, and the louder they are, the better the marketing. Is that how it works?
And that's how it's worked. The trouble is for advertisers, it's made the whole landscape of advertising in news media much more complicated, because, if your audience is largely centre, politically or socially progressive, then it sort of dictates a certain area that you should go in. But again, it starts to fragment the way that you think about your audience from a political perspective. This is why a lot of brands really struggle with getting involved in supporting socially progressive movements, because of the backlash that could happen. And the wider that we're getting that separation in society, the more nefarious it is, or the more difficult it is, probably a better word, to actually choose where to lay your message, because advertising looks like you're supporting the message that's surrounding.
Yeah, well, Qantas found that out with the yes vote and all of the backlash from that as well. Always appreciate your insights. Darren Woolley there from Trinity P3. Good to have you on Ticker, sir.
Thank you very much. I love being here.